I recently saw Blade Runner a week ago, and then watched it again a few days later. It's a flawed masterpiece. The weakness comes from the characterization and plot. You interestingly can't analyze character and plot separately. The plot is what exposes the characters' strengths and vulnerabilities, and the characters forward the plot and make it interesting. In the case of Blade Runner, the plot is simple and the characters are simple. The plot is Deckard needs to find rogue replicants, which are essentially very intelligent robots. The replicants don't want to be found, and they also want their lifespans increased. Deckard therefore seeks out the replicants, and the replicants seek out their creator. The characterization is a bit more interesting than the plot, but the dialogue is off. There seems to be a lack of warmth or intimacy in the world of Blade Runner. There is even a profound distance in Deckard's relationship with Rachel, whose scenes give Deckard the most screen time to be expressive. He shows real frustration with Rachel being a replicant, possibly because he can't reconcile with how he feels about humans and how he feels about replicants. Later, he forces himself upon Rachel, which provokes a vulnerable, emotional response from her. She didn't know Deckard existed until a few days ago, so it's clearly not a pre-programmed response. But other than Rachel and Batty, Deckard has very little interaction with other characters. He's almost the same as he was in the beginning of the film, only 1, he doesn't want to be a Blade Runner anymore, and 2, he has a person who happens to be Rachel he truly wants to protect. For this reason, Blade Runner is a complicated masterpiece, because most films have complex character arcs or themes. Lenate, which is my favorite film, adds up the characters Lydia and Giovanni scene by scene, frame by frame. 2001 A Space Odyssey has a very specific plot of mankind's intellectual and spiritual ascent. Blade Runner doesn't really explore themes of mortality or humanity, except through Ruckert Hauer's character, Batty, whom we will talk about eventually. But in reality, stories and themes are abstractions we use to understand films. In the end, a film is audio and video, pure and simple. I struggle to understand myself that it was not the world of Blade Runner that is so intriguing. We live in the year 2020, where the technology of Blade Runner is quite quaint, but the world is simply an idea spun up in someone's head. The expression of that world arises to incredible art. This is one of the oddities I found between the stories told in Japan, especially anime, and the stories told in the West. There is a profound patience for letting the environment tell more of a story than people. It's a razor-thin subtlety, really. Kurosawa's Rashomon begins with the rain speaking more coherently to the gate than the humans do to each other. The first apparition you see in Miyazaki's Spirited Away is really the abandoned temple, because desecrated buildings have more presence than people. It always amuses me to compare Ghibli films to Pixar films, as the bizarre element, toys, monsters, fish, are always introduced by the number of bodies on screen, versus the very opposite, the amount of vacant space in spite of people. That very well summarizes Ridley Scott's Blade Runner and its profound influence on anime sci-fi. The landscape and the score almost tell more of a story, or have a greater character than the characters themselves. The intrusion of rain and smoke, on screen and in the soundtrack, breaks up the conventional lines of daily conversation. The constant presence of blue and yellow almost caricature the brown-pink of human skin, making flesh seem inhuman. Flickering shadows and neon lights seem to suggest the transience of existence, emphasized best by Tyrell and Batty's scene and Zoro's death. Then there's the synth score of its rapid attack and decay, as well as its lingering sustain, which gets muddled up in jazz and Asian string instruments. One also has to mention the sheer amount of urban noises and people speaking in Asian languages.
Look, Dr. Huisis, down in First Sector, Chinatown.
The cook in the opening speaks Japanese and hears Cantonese. The effect of video and audio was to dehumanize the characters, rendering human existence as a sequence of formless, purposeless shapes, thus giving strength to Gaff's line. It's too bad she won't live, but then again, who does? It's the rightful instinct of a critic to try to find an intellectual thread on any work of art, and reason with a particular choice in plot and visual. But I think Blade Runner's strength lies in harmony, elements suggesting ideas to one another, yet not giving away a clear symbol. As cluttered a film as it is, with each scene filled to the brim of obstructions, to the point where it seems truly unlivable, it all adds up to the artistic effect of diminishing the stature of the characters. More than the script and dialogue itself, the elements of each frame tell this existentialist theme. I think that's why the film has been hit and miss for some people. You can clearly see the influence this approach to storytelling has had on anime such as Evangelion and Ghost in the Shell. The directors preferred a storytelling style that emphasized Taoist and Buddhist ideas, such as the paradox of transience and the eternity of space and time. Truly great anime revels in paradox. It does not go towards the binary definition of comedy and tragedy. Batty is the greatest paradox of all in Blade Runner. He is the most violent of the characters, yet has the most grace. He is the most intelligent, and yet is wounded the most by emotion. His great, brutal hand, which alone has the strength to kill any person, is pierced by a small nail neglected in a rotting piece of wood. Later, that same hand, bloody and huge, gently picks up Deckard from falling to his death. "I've seen things you people wouldn't believe," he says with arrogance and humility. In a single speech, he expresses the brutality and ugliness of life, with a hint of regret of not having seen more. When he dies, he evades comedy and tragedy. Though I think the characters of the film are expressed very simply, I can't help but think it's towards the purpose of this scene. Humans and replicants lack wisdom or passion or lust for life, but rather than being defined by tragedy, the overwhelming lack of meaning, Batty evades suffering, refuses to allow tragedy to define his existence. It's no wonder that the monologue has taken a life of its own. Thanks for listening.